NFL Network reporter Cameron Wolfe joins me today for a one-on-one. And Cam, the last time we talked, we were previewing the Vikings heading into training camp, and a word that you used a lot was the word hope, because that time of the year, a lot of teams have hope and optimism going into the season, and then once October, November rolls around, that's when the realistic expectations start to surface. So now you got a 4-1 Vikings team facing a 3-2 Miami Dolphins team. Is hope still in the picture for both teams heading into Sunday?
Absolutely. I mean, especially when you talk about Minnesota. I mean, we talked about what was realistic expectations. And I think I mentioned playoffs. I thought this is a team that could, at the end of the season, could be competing for either division spot or a wild card spot. And, I don't know if everybody thought that, but at 4-1, I'm sure Vikings fans are pretty happy. It's still early. But I think what's been impressive for the Vikings as far as the hope perspective is I don't even think they've played their best ball. I think Harrison Smith had talked about that this week, about the fact they're still learning, they're still making mistakes, but they're winning. And it's all not often that you're able to do that. And so, you look at the Vikings right now atop the NFC North, 3-0 in their division, and they're still only 5 games in under Kevin O'Connell. So I think that hope was it had a lot of rightness in it for the Vikings perspective. Now for the Dolphins, they started off blazing hot. They were 3-0. A lot of that hope from the offseason of trading for Tyreek Hill and Tua's third year under Mike McDaniel, it was at the highest over those first 3 games. They beat Buffalo, they beat Baltimore, but then the injuries started to hit. And as you've known, if you've seen some of the national perspective, they've been in the middle of this concussion situation, whether it be with Tua and this past week with Teddy. And so they've lost 2 straight games. And so that hope has dissipated a little bit. But I do think that a lot of people here in Miami are thinking that once they get back healthy, they hope that they can resume the type of play they were doing over the first few weeks of the season. So I think that's what makes this game so exciting. These are 2 teams that probably internally had a lot of hope, but I think nationally, there probably weren't a lot of people that are saying that, hey, these are going to be one of the best teams in their conference at this point in the season. And so, only 5 games in, but I think that both teams probably are happy for the most part for where they are.
Well, I'm sure a lot of Miami Dolphins fans are hopeful for Tua to be able to come back soon. But for you, is it too soon to put him back in the game and possibly face the Vikings on Sunday?
Yeah, I think this situation has been tough for everyone because the optics of the situation were very scary, right? He had the injury against Buffalo, they had the injury against Buffalo. They came back on, and everybody was like, "Did he have a concussion then?" And then 4 days later, he had the concussion, and it was very visibly hard to watch. I was in that game in Cincinnati and saw him brought onto an ambulance, taken to the hospital. His family was there. And so those are the moments that make you think, hey, this is bigger than football. And so, maybe we shouldn't just be thinking in the timeline of, oh, is he going to be back next week? Is he going to be able to play? And I think the Dolphins are taking that perspective that, he hasn't been ruled out for this week yet, but he hasn't evolved in the concussion protocol to the football stuff, which is phase 3 of the step 5 process. And so at least my individual opinion, I think I would be a little surprised to see him this week, just given where he is in the protocol and how gruesome that concussion looks. So I do think that they are smart to err on the side of caution, because although you want to win this game, although you want to make it to the playoffs, this is a guy's life that you have to think about. This is a guy's livelihood that you have to think about. And so I think they should take as much time as he needs. And so I do think that it's more likely than not, you'll see either Teddy Bridgewater or Skylar Thompson starting for Miami this week.
Gotcha. So what's different in a Sans Tua offense? We saw Teddy and Skylar play last week, but in your opinion, what makes that offense different when Tua is in versus when Tua is in?
Well, first of all, I think a big thing is he's the captain and leader of their team. And so there's a lot of questions his first couple of years on, what his teammates think about him. I can tell you, just watching them a lot this offseason, they rally around him. When he came back in that Buffalo game, their whole spirits were uplifted. And I think you could literally feel the atmosphere. So I think it's one element of it's not even tangible. It's just the feel that you have and confidence in your guy. And the second element, and this is actually interesting to discuss given the narrative of Tua in this offseason, they have been a lot more productive down the field with Tua as their quarterback. Early in the offseason, the question around Tua, can he throw the deep ball to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle? Well, through his first 3.5 games or so, he was one of the most productive deep ball throwers in football. Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle were some of the most productive deep ball catchers in football, leading the league in 40-plus yard receptions. And so with Teddy and Skylar Thompson at quarterback, they've had to dial back a little bit more of those deep balls. They've had to have more of a short-based offense. And so teams can sit on that. They can sit on that and they can say, hey, if we tackle these guys well, then we can make those catches 4 yards instead of 40 yards. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing. They've been forced to be a lot more conservative offensively, and that's made them put a lot longer drives together, which, as we know, is harder to put 15, 18 play drives together for touchdowns than it is, 3-play drives.
That's very true. And I guess for this Vikings offense, switching to our side of the ball, we're hoping to get some shots down the field. But you look at this Miami Dolphins defense, they were looking really good, especially when it came to stopping the run before last week when they gave up 5 rushing touchdowns against the New York Jets. So how does this Minnesota Vikings offense fare against, I guess, this new look Miami Dolphins defense?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for them is do what they do best. Justin Jefferson, I told you, I love the kid. I think that he could have a breakout game this week because, as you mentioned, this is a Dolphins defense that had a lot of acclaim coming into the season. But you look at the numbers, they're the bottom 5 in passing defense so far this season. And there's been a lot of factors to that, most notably injuries. They expected Byron Jones, one of their top corners, to be back by training camp. It's week 6, and he's already been ruled out. He's still on PUP with an Achilles injury. And Xavier Howard, who's been their top corner, a top 5 cornerback in this league, has dealt with groin injuries for the last 3 or 4 weeks. So he hasn't been 100%. He's given up more plays than he traditionally has. And last week he had to miss the game because of those injuries. And so you've been down or limited on your top 2 cornerbacks. And so they've been forced to play a lot more zone coverage than they typically play. They're typically a heavy man team and a heavy blitz team. Essentially, our guys are better than your guys. We're going to bring the heat. What you going to do with it? And they haven't been able to do that this year. And so, looking at this week, you got a guy like Justin Jefferson, and we've seen what he's done to teams who have dared to guard him one-on-one. I mean, Marshawn Lattimore is probably still thinking about that game earlier this season. So I don't anticipate the Dolphins playing their typical scheme, which is man-to-man, single high safety, and blitzing often. I think they'll do what they've done a lot more this season, is play zone coverage, probably have a safety over shaded on Justin Jefferson's side. And so I'm going to be very interested to see if Kevin O'Connell can do what he's done a lot this season and move Justin Jefferson around and try to get him away from some of the schemes and see if they can scheme things open. So I do think, like you mentioned, they have been a better run defense. So this may be a game for Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson a little bit more than Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison.
Yeah, my last question for you, because those are all really good points, is what is one key stat or one key factor that may play into the outcome of this upcoming game on Sunday against the Vikings and the Dolphins?
I don't have the exact stat, but I think the Dolphins are in the bottom 10 in sacks this season, and they have been in the bottom quarter of the league in pass rush rate. And so this is a team, as I mentioned, that blitzes often, but since they haven't been able to have that DB pressure, they haven't been able to blitz with the frequency if they want it. So they need to be able to get pressure with their front 4 guys. It's a game for Jalen Phillips and Emmanuel Ogbah, 2 guys they've put a lot of resources in to try to get home. If the Vikings can protect up front, can protect Kirk Cousins so that he can get down the field for Justin Jefferson, for Adam Thielen, for some of those running backs or Irv Smith, then I think this is a game the Vikings should win. And so to me, it's, can the Dolphins figure out a way to protect those banged up corners with their pass rush? If not, the Vikings offense has significant advantages in this game. And I think that with a, likely backup quarterback, their offense probably would outscore the Dolphins unless something changes in that department.
Well, that's all sweet to our mouths for Minnesota Vikings fans, especially looking to go 5-1 after winning 3 straight divisional games. Cameron Wolfe, looking forward to seeing you down there in Miami, my friend.
All right, man. Appreciate you, Gabe.
Yes, sir.